Check this out. Quarter bends. Half step bends. Whole step bends. Let's even do step and a half. Alright, so in this lesson, we're going to go over the different kinds of bends we have. We have whole step bends, half step bends, quarter bends, step and a half bends. And what that means is that you're bending to a note from one note to another note that's either a half step away, which means 1 fret, a whole step away, which means 2 frets, or a step and a half, which is 3 frets. And then in a quarter bend, it's somewhere in between 1 fret and no frets. We could do a bend, add vibrato at the top. So I'm going to talk to you about a few of these different kinds of bends and how you could practice them and incorporate them into your playing. Before we get into the lesson, please go ahead and click subscribe so that you get all of the latest and greatest content from Guitar Tricks, and tap that bell if you want to be notified of any new content that comes out. All right, so the cool thing about guitar is that we can manipulate the strings with our fingers. A piano, for instance, can't do that. There's a hammer, it hits the string, and that's it. But we could slide on the notes. We can do vibrato. We can do bends, right? So what's great about these techniques is they make your playing sound more vocal, because singers naturally bend their way up to notes. You don't hear a singer go la la la. They usually go la la la. There's these little, they travel to get from one note to another. So the more we do that, the more vocal it sounds, the more we bend the notes. That's why slide guitar players sound the most vocal. So having good bending technique is a huge part of blues guitar especially. So players like Albert King and B.B. King, and then Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan and John Mayer, it's hard to listen to them for even a few seconds without hearing a bend. It's a huge part of their playing, and it adds this dramatic vocal quality. So I recommend you listen to just the first 5 seconds of the song Gravity by John Mayer, just to hear how sweet a bend can sound. But then of course all rock and metal players took the influence of the blues and brought it in a new direction. So even listening to bands like Pantera or metal bands, and then someone like Steve Lukather, who's a great rock player, they also have amazing bending technique. And I think about Steve Lukather because I just had to learn the song Rosanna for a cover band, and he plays this little solo in the middle. It's so short and sweet, but it has the most powerful and accurate bends. So check out that solo as well. So when we talk about quarter step, half step, whole step, step and a half, we're talking about a distance that a note is going to travel. So for instance, if I take this note on the 10th fret of the G string, this is the note F, up a half step is 1 fret. So a half step means 1 fret, which is F sharp. So that means if I want to bend this a half step, I do that. So I want it to match this pitch. Right? If I bend it a whole step, F to G, I want it to match the sound of going up 2 frets. That's 1 whole step. And this is a great way to practice it. First, play your original note, play the note you want to bend to. Play your original note, play the note you want to bend to. And then a quarter bend would be between here and here. It would just be very little. And a lot of times players do that, they just kind of, it just goes a little out of tune for a moment, and it sounds sweet, right? It's one of those little things, these quarter bends in certain places, that could really make a big difference. And then last but not least, I did a step and a half, which from here on the 11th fret, I bent up to the 14th, to the sound of the 14th fret on the B string. And sometimes you could do both. So I could get this sound with bends. So if you're soloing in the pentatonic, the thing about the pentatonic scale is there are no half steps. Everything's either a whole step or a step and a half away. So that makes half step bends not make as much sense within the pentatonic scale, right? Like if I went like this, it's just going to sound a little weird because that's not part of that scale. But the diatonic scale has half steps all over the place. So if I looked at C minor instead of C minor pentatonic, we have all these half steps. Whole step, half step, right? Now, even within the pentatonic, sometimes it sounds nice to bend up to one of the notes in the pentatonic, like this. Instead of going, I go, right? Even though this is pentatonic, I took these notes right before the note in the pentatonic and bent up. And that could sound really nice. Right? So that's a nice place to add half step bends if you're playing pentatonic. If you're playing diatonic, find your half steps. And instead of going, you can go. Right, so I'm just instead of going, I'm going, instead of going, right? Now, whole step bends, there's certain places where they sound amazing. One place is bending up from this note in the first shape of the pentatonic scale to this note. Another place is bending up from this note in this little area right here, sometimes called the Albert King box, because Albert King played most of his riffs in that little area. Bending this note to this note. And then sometimes at the top, you can give it a little vibrato. Now here's the thing about bending. When you bend a string, you usually touch other strings and make a lot of noise. So really the hardest part about bending, in my opinion, is muting the other strings. And there's two ways to do that. One way is to block the other strings with your first finger. So all you're gonna do is keep the first finger kind of covering the other strings, and then you use these other two fingers, if we call this one finger 1, we use fingers 2 and 3 to kind of support each other, like this. So I got this first finger blocking the other strings. I've got the second and third finger supporting each other. So then when I hit that string, you're not really hearing any of the other strings. You hear a little bit of muting sound, but it doesn't really carry through. You're hearing it because there's nothing else going on. But if I didn't do that, that would happen, right? So I want to block those strings. The other way is with the palm of your right hand. I'm putting my palm over the lowest 3 strings so that I'm doubling up. I'm muting over here, I'm muting over here. And then sometimes you even hear players do this. A little break of the muted strings, you know? Now, as far as how to bend, how to get the notes up, I like to think of this fulcrum technique, okay? So this part of my hand is on the bottom of the neck, and it's more of a motion of a twist. It's a twisting motion. I'm not really using my fingers to press the string up. I'm putting my finger in the right place, and then I'm twisting my whole hand. So it's this twist motion that you want to get used to. So that note on the 10th fret of the G string, if I'm going to bend it, notice how I'm kind of just doing this. It's more of this technique. It's like 90% this and like 10% or even 5% with the fingers. Just the fine details I control with the fingers. Like maybe I press up a millimeter with my finger when I get to the top. And then to add a little vibrato maybe at the top. So another thing I wanted to talk about is whether you should bend up or down. I would say for the most part, you should bend up, because obviously with the high E string, you can only bend up. And that's the string you're probably going to bend the most often. Right? So if you're going to really develop your up technique for that string, you might as well use it on the other strings too. Now on the lowest three strings, you can only bend down, well, at least on the lowest string, the low E string. So on those lowest three strings, I'm going to bend down. Now I find with the down technique, I use more fingers than on the up. Like I said, with the up, it's mostly the fulcrum, but on the down, it's kind of more of a squeeze, right? Because your squeeze, you have way more strength than your push. You have less strength here, more strength with squeezing. So when you're pulling down, you can really get a lot of strength with this kind of squeezing down technique. So something to experiment with. So you want to practice this on all the strings, right? And you want to hit your targets from here to here, 10 to 12, say. Then here, 10 to 12. You want to build the muscle memory of how far you have to bend to get that sound. And you want to keep comparing it. You want to think, all right, so here's the note. Am I flat? Yes. A little higher? Got it. Nope, I was still a little flat. I went a little sharp there. Now, I don't know if you could tell, but my fingertips are pretty ripped up from bending all the time. But there's layers of callus, so there's no pain. If I practice the same amount consistently, it heals up and it just turns a certain hardness. Whenever I up my practicing 20%, 30%, I break the skin more if I'm doing a lot of bending or working on something with a lot of bending. And the other thing is, the harder your calluses, the more control you're gonna have. You're really gonna have good grip on the string. So it's just gonna get better as you go along. Right now I can see I'm shedding all over the guitar, dead skin. Now the third finger is the most powerful to bend with, the ring finger, especially when you support it with the second finger, the middle finger, and you have your first finger kind of guarding the other strings, like I said. So this, is your most powerful. Doing a whole step bend with your first finger, you could do it and you just mute with your palm. You rarely see players use their first finger to do a whole step bend. First finger is great for a half step bend. Half step bend's great with the first finger. and you're using your palm again to mute any of the open strings. Second finger. Second finger you might use sometimes if you want to do something like. So what I did here, from the 13th fret, I bent up to the sound of the 15th, and then from the 11th, I bent up to the sound of the 13th, like this. Right, so third finger, second finger. Some people might even go, use third for all. Or the first finger, but it takes a lot of strength to get that first finger. I like the second if I'm gonna do like a back-to-back bend like that. All right, everybody, I hope that lesson was helpful. If you wanna learn more about bending and sliding and vibrato and all that stuff, head over to guitartricks.com. Have fun, happy playing, and I'll see you in the next lesson.